Hey, it says I'm live. Look at that. I hope it's all working now. If you're here for the Squirrel Squadron and you want to talk to me about asking technical questions when you're clueless, you're in the right place. We usually have my friend Laura, who is my community manager and keeps the Squirrel Squadron going, with us. She's normally here waving at me when things don't work, but I don't have her, so I only have you guys. So please, would someone out there just tell me you can hear me, this is working, it's live, life is good, and you're actually hearing me. That would really help me out. Of course, I'd also like to hear what brought you here. Why are you interested in asking technical questions when you're clueless? What sorts of technical questions do you want to ask, and all that sort of thing. So please respond if you are out there. Please make sure I know. At worst, I'm going to be talking to the recording, and that's okay, because I'll publish this recording on the forum. I'll explain what all these things are for people who don't know, and you'll always be able to come back and check this out on the same platform where you are now, whether that's YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever else we've invented to put these things, or on the Squirrel Squadron forum. So at least I'm recording, but I hope someone's out there. So please let me know. I can see your comments, and I'd sure appreciate it if you could just give me a quick sound check. Do I sound okay? Do I look okay? Am I upside down? Are there dancing bears in front of me? What's happening? Help me know that it's working. I'm going to soldier on, assuming that it is. And what I want to do is first tell you just a little bit about the Squirrel Squadron. Why am I doing this? Who am I? How's this all work? The Squirrel Squadron is my community of tech and non-tech people. We're up to thousands now of executives from around the world. And there's vigorous discussions all the time about how to make technology insanely profitable. So just to list a few that we had on our forum. So this is an online forum where people are asking questions all day, talking about topics, asking technical questions. Some of them are clueless. This is good. And we just had a discussion of Kinevin, whatever that is. That's a sense-making framework that I find really interesting. It's a way of understanding when things are complex and you really don't know how they work, and when they're complicated and your engineers understand them, but you don't. So very helpful framework there. We had someone asking about books on scaling in chaos. So what happens, excuse me, excuse me, what happens when you sneeze? No, what happens when you have a team that used to be quite small and it suddenly gets very big? What is the chaotic experience that you experience there, and how do you move forward from that? How do you make greater progress? So great book recommendations there, and lots of other interesting questions, puzzles. Someone was asking what an AI focused CTO would look like, I assume because he's hiring one. So we have those kinds of discussions happening all the time. I send weekly emails. I sent one this week. I don't have the book here, about a guy called, where did he go? I have his book. Uh, Someone's taken it away. But a guy called Shed Samov, who makes insane things like the Martin Loofah King. It's a loofah. You clean yourself with it, but it celebrates Martin Luther King. All kinds of other crazy novelty things, and he does it in weeks. He does it very fast, even though he has to get all his stuff shipped from China. So there's lots of lessons there for software. This week, just to give you a preview, I'm going to talk about choke points. Why is it very important to choke your development team? Not physically like this, but to make sure that there's only one way to get developers building things. I have some scary lessons learned from current clients who are struggling with that. And there's events coming up. So there's this one where I'm going to be talking to you about how to answer these technical questions, how to get those, ask the technical questions and get good answers. But there's loads more, and they're always free. This is my way of giving back. This is something that I do so that you guys can all learn. And guess what? I learn the most in all of these. So next week, I'm going to be talking about painless culture change. So how do you improve your culture very quickly and painlessly without it being difficult to switch from one way of working to another? And in a few weeks, we're going to have a famous, fantastic author, Joanna Rothman, joining us to talk about fake agile. What does it mean when your team says they're agile, but actually they don't get very much done? So those are events coming up. Those are things happening in the Squirrel Squadron. If you're interested in that, go to squirrelsquadron.com. I'm a little bit worried because I haven't seen anybody say anything yet. if you're out there, it would really help me if you would just say, hey, I'm out here. Make sure that I know I've pushed all the right buttons without Laura here to make sure I'm doing it all correctly. I'm supposed to be a technological expert, but I'm not sure I'm an absolute expert in using StreamYard and streaming to you effectively. So give me a hello. Maybe the comments aren't working today for some reason. That would be okay. At worst, we're going to get a recording because I can see that part's working for sure. But I'd sure like to hear from you if you're out there. And especially, I'd like to hear from you about what kinds of questions you would like to ask, because I think there are really interesting questions that you can ask. Hey, somebody's out there. Michael, thank you very much. Okay, good. Now I'll take a deep breath. I'll relax and I can focus on this because, Michael, I bet you have questions you would like to ask of your technology team, or maybe you're on the technology side and you wish you got better questions. So let me know, Michael, everyone else who's out there. I can see many of you are there. I just want to make sure it's working. Let me know what kinds of questions you would like to ask. Where do you find that there's a barrier? What brought you here? What things could I tell you? Because I have tons of material on my notes here. I can run through those, tell you some great stories, but we'll have a much better session if you interrupt me and say, hey, Squirrel, I disagree. I tried that and it didn't work. Oh, I think we should do it this way. Debate, discussion, that's the heart of the Squirrel Squadron. So very interested in doing that for you. Okay, so let me start with a visual aid. I didn't have Shed's book. I thought I had it right behind me, but I didn't. But I do have something I made sure I brought along. Now, you're not going to be able to see the detail of this, but I would love to send you one of these. This is a certificate that officially says you are permitted. I have to look around it here. There we go. Get it to the camera correctly. That you are permitted to ask technical questions, including very detailed technical questions, like, why are you doing that? Who asked for that? When will it be done? Why? What does this word mean? All of those sorts of things. It's official. It's signed by me and numbered. You get an official certificate that allows you to ask questions. Now, this is slightly silly, of course, but I really do hand these out. If you send me your address, and just look on douglassquirrel.com or squirrelsquadron.com, you'll find my address there. Send me an email with your physical address. I will post you one of these, absolutely free. And that's because I want you to know that you have permission to ask these questions, or you can award the certificate to somebody else. Tell me to send it to somebody in your organization who's a little shy about asking questions, because the very best thing you can do to help your technology team is to ask them loads and loads of questions. And the more questions you ask, the more you will be informed and the more you can help them. Now, I'm going to make some suggestions about how to ask those questions, how to get better answers, how to structure things so that that works better. But even if you don't listen to anything else, if you have to run away and you don't listen to the recording and you only listen to this part, take the certificate to heart, whether you get a physical one from me or not, and ask more questions. Because the problem is, us engineers, we have these fancy language. You know, we talk about ANNs and LLMs, and we have these crazy acronyms. We have tools like Python and Kubernetes and Docker, and none of these words mean what you think they mean. And it can be extremely intimidating and confusing to come into this environment and get these very technical answers from someone from whom you just want to know, when will it be done? How are you doing it? Why are you having trouble? So we'll talk about how to get better answers, but keep asking the question and don't accept an answer that you don't understand. Make sure you keep coming back. And if you're having a lot of trouble, hey, get on the Squirrel Squadron forum, ask, I'll help you. Other people there will help you as well with phrasing your question in a way that could be helpful, as well as all the tools and techniques we're going to talk about here. So now, one thing that was fantastic on the forum is we got a bunch of sample questions. And people really responded to this. I was amazed and pleased that we got so many. So I can't go through all of them, but I'll just give you a few to give you kind of a flavor of what sorts of questions people would like to ask. And I'm going to make suggestions about some of these examples and so on. So Roland asked, how quickly can you fix a security issue? How long does it take to deploy new software? And why is there a difference between the two? Roland works in security, so he cares a lot about getting security fixes out quickly. And sometimes that takes longer than getting new software out, which is not good because the new software often contains security problems. So Roland is from one part of the organization. He's from the security part, trying to get the technologists to give him good answers. So I like his example very well. Julia, who's on the product side, so she's a product manager, she's asking, why are our 5 of our engineers all working on 5 different problems? Why can't they work on the same one? And that's a really excellent why question. You're asking what's the reasoning behind this? How did you get to this conclusion? And there's an assumption behind that one, which maybe we'll come back to, because making that assumption explicit can be helpful. Minesh asked, what's the point of 2 code reviews before a merge can be approved other than checking on quality? Now, that's quite a technical one. That's a detailed one, which I assume Minesh is looking at the team, seeing how they're working, and concluding, hey, hang on, they're not working in the most efficient way, it seems to me. Now, I'm going to take that one apart as well, because there's some assumptions in there. There's some things we could slow down. Rich asked, why should we refactor? This is one I'm asking all the time, because typically engineers use this term refactoring in a terrible way. And I could go on a rant about that, which I won't today. But when you hear technical things like, oh, we can't do that for you because we're refactoring this week, or oh, this sprint is taken up with addressing technical debt. We had another great discussion on technical debt on the forum. All of these sorts of terms that don't mean quite what you think they mean, those are great things to bring up and ask questions about, and don't be afraid of it. You may not understand the answer. We'll deal with what you do in that case, but ask the question. It's very, very healthy. If you don't understand it, probably means the person doing it doesn't understand it either. So asking also helps to clarify. And Andy Parker asked one of my favorites and one of my co-author Jeffrey Frederick's favorites. I learned this one from him. What's preventing us from shipping this feature today? Today is not too soon. Why can't we do this today? And of course, I teach a lot of people elephant carpaccio, a method of getting releases and new pieces of software out every single day. So I'm asking that question all the time. Okay, so fantastic examples of the sorts of questions that people would like to ask. Let me tell you a story about a case where someone asked a question not very well and what happened, and then how we kind of dealt with that and how we improve. So a client some years ago had a development team who was building a new API. You might not know what an API is. It's just a way for 2 computers to talk to each other, often from different organizations. So in this case, the company provided a whole lot of very interesting data, and customers paid them lots of money to have this data. And the companies wanted not just to get it arriving in the post on pieces of paper, they wanted it in an electronic form, and they had this API for getting it. And what had happened is that the marketing team were demanding that the API be ready. And they said, when can it be ready? Can it be ready by March the 4th? Can't you have it ready? What stops you from getting it ready? Why can't you have it for March the 4th? And the development team came to me, and their CTO said, my God, Squirrel, we get all this pressure from marketing. We don't know what's so special about March the 4th. It seems pretty arbitrary to us. And we know for sure we can't have the new version of the API ready by then. No way in heck, there's no possibility of doing that. Well, what's going on here? So this series of questions had assumptions inside it. We're going to come back to that theme a lot here. The assumption was that March the 4th was feasible, that it was a good idea, that people would understand why March the 4th was important, and none of this was true. So poor engineers were very confused. Now, I had them go off and clarify to help the person asking the questions ask better questions. And the result was they learned several things. First of all, the first question should have been, do you know that we have bought we've rented a ballroom, and we're bringing every single customer that we currently have to this room, plus a bunch of prospects. And we have balloons and clowns and musicians and, who knows what else for this big affair. And guess when it is? It's March the 4th. So that's the context. That's the detail that was missing from the original set of questions, right? We're doing something here in the marketing department, and we need some help with it. Now, the marketing department assumed that the engineers knew this. They just hadn't bothered to read their email, and they hadn't paid attention to the marketing plans. And so the engineers didn't understand this. Once they understood that, they still said, no chance that we can possibly have this ready. But it became clear after some discussion that the marketing folks should have asked a different question about having something ready. Because what they didn't need was a fully working API with all the error handling and all the protocols in place and all of the strange cases documented and ready for everyone to implement. What the marketing team needed was to market the thing. So they needed a way to demonstrate that it could do cool new stuff, that it could connect in new ways and handle different types of requests and do things in a way that it couldn't before, to get these people in the room to sign up for it. After they signed up, it would take them 6 months to implement it, by which time the developers would be long done, right? Everything would be all finished by later in the year. And so what the marketing people really wanted to ask was, what can we demonstrate for the customer conference on March the 4th to get people to buy it and then implement it, right? And then we can get all the other bits done. Once they asked the question that way, the answer was, we have a demo you can use today. This was in January or something, it was months before. We have a demo you could use today. It doesn't handle everything, but you're going to be on stage, right? It's a controlled environment. You can just show what you need to. We can solve this problem for you. So they worked with the marketing department, made sure that by March the 4th, the bits that they needed were there. They could do a good demo, that they could handle requests from the audience and other things. So it was a good, solid, real demo. But nobody claimed that it was all finished, and nobody cared. And they sold lots at the conference and got people to upgrade to the new version and so on, because they could see there was a real version. It really worked. And they knew it wasn't finished, but they didn't need it right away. It was going to take them a while to implement. So that's a really good live example. And I literally today was telling that story to a client because they had this problem. They had this demand from the marketing department for not understanding. And I said, I bet this is what's going on. They said, oh, yeah, they do have a conference around then. Maybe that's what it is. So this is the type of question that if you ask it in this without giving access to some of the assumptions and the beliefs and the context that you have, is really going to confuse engineers, and they're going to give you bad answers. Like, no, we can't do that. There's no hope. It's impossible to have the API ready by then. It wasn't true, but it was because the marketing department meant something very different from what the engineers meant by done. So understanding what that word means and other important words is a very important technique, very, very useful. One thing I'll put on the forum, I don't want to go on this direction right now, is I'll put a link to a great article by Roger Schwartz called 8 Behaviors for Smarter Teams. Has a whole bunch of different nuggets of advice on what to do. And the very first one is agree on what important words mean. Because if I mean by done has to be totally done and dusted and everything's documented and it's beautiful and perfect, and you mean what can I demo to some customers to get them to buy, we are not going to have a very helpful conversation, and your question is not going to get a great answer. So agree on the definitions. That can be a very helpful technique. So now I also want to illustrate something else that came up recently with a client. I came along to a rather contentious meeting in which somebody was unhappy with the progress of a technology team, and really wanted to know what was holding them back. And I think his heart was in the right place. His interest was in helping this engineering team to go faster. But unfortunately, he did not ask genuine questions. And so I want to illustrate with his example what a not genuine question is, and then I'll illustrate what a genuine question would sound like. A genuine question, very briefly, is one whose answer might surprise you, from which you expect to learn something. And if you look at lawyers in a courtroom, they never want to be surprised. Lawyers are actually trained never to ask the question, why? Why were you outside the bank with your motor running, Mr. Jones? Were you, what was the reason for that? Because Mr. Jones might say, I was waiting for my grandmother. And of course, the lawyer wants to establish that Mr. Jones was the getaway driver for the bank robbery. What instead the lawyer does is ask leading questions. Mr. Jones, you knew the perpetrators of this bank robbery, didn't you? They were your best friends. You met them this morning at the bar. You came to the bank and you didn't have anybody else in the car, did you? You were interested in making this money, weren't you? And so on. So ask very leading questions in a very directive way, and that doesn't help. That unfortunately boxes in the other person in a way the lawyer wants to, but you don't. So when you're asking technology questions, when you want to ask the sorts of questions we talked about, and I'll go back to one of those in a moment to illustrate how it's kind of a leading question. We want to ask it in a more genuine way. If you have that kind of agenda, like the lawyer, work hard to remove it. And so in this example I wanted to talk about, my client was really grilling, really asking a lot of tough questions of the engineering leader. And so we asked questions like, I don't think that you really believe the answer you just gave me. I think you knew how this meeting was going to go, and you knew that before you started the meeting. So you didn't really have to have it, did you? Very leading question, right? He's got a narrative and he's trying to fit the other person into it. He may be right, but asking the question this way is not going to help. It's going to put the other person on the defensive. Even more, it's going to lead the person into answering in a way that matches his expectations. And that's not what you want. When you're asking questions about something you don't know very well, you want to be surprised by the answer. You want to find out new things that change how you look at the situation and that give you new options. That's the mindset you want to have. So a genuine question in this case might be, and it might be a series of questions, what was the reasoning behind having this meeting? What did you believe before you had the meeting? Did you have any assumptions about how the meeting would go? Did you believe that the outcome of the meeting would be one of these two things? Or did you think it might be something else? A really good way to make sure your question is genuine, or to signal that you have a genuine intent, that you really want to be surprised, is to ask the question with options. Is there only one way to release, or are there several different choices that we could make about how to release? It's not clear to me that our system will allow us to do more than one thing. Can we do more than one, or is there only one? And because I'm offering the option, you can say, yeah, actually, the way we built it, it's really limited, and we can only do one way. There is something we could do to fix that, but it would involve this investment. Hey, wait a minute, maybe we can invest, make it simpler to release, and therefore we can do it faster and get more information from our customers. That's a more effective, genuine question. You're getting a better answer. So if you want to ask a technology question, don't focus as much on whether you have the right language, whether you know the right words. We'll talk about that in a minute. The most important thing you can do is make sure it's a genuine question. You're saying, this is something I don't know about. That's why I'm asking. I would like different answers. I'd like surprising answers. I'd like answers that are not ones that I assumed I might get. So that's a very helpful method. Let me just invite you again, those of you who have topics and questions. You came here for some reason. Michael's out there. Several other people I can see are here with us. If there are particular questions you'd like to ask and you haven't been able to, or you feel intimidated, or you feel that there's too much jargon around, please put them in the chat. Please put them in the comments of whatever platform you're using, and I'd love to talk about those. What I'm going to use, though, is the questions I've got here from the forum. And I had one that was, so I'm going to give my friend Julia a hard time. She has all kinds of wonderful questions, brings up lots of great stuff in our community. So I'm giving her a hard time to help her. She asks, how can we encourage more working as a team and fewer conversations like, just give me my work, tell me exactly what to build, and I will build it? The problem with that one is Julia has an assumption. Her assumption is that working as a team is better. Now, that seems kind of obvious. Doesn't everybody want to work as a team? Isn't that always better? The problem is that your assumptions don't help you to get surprising answers. So let me come up with a more genuine way to ask the question, inviting more different answers, and then some of the wacky answers that you might get that would really help you. Right? If you ask it the way Julia's asked it, she's trying. That's great. I'm glad she's asking. I'd much rather she ask than not ask. But the problem with hers is it kind of puts me in a box. I can't say, well, working as a team is a dumb idea. Or, those conversations are actually really positive. I'm kind of stuck with her framing. Whereas if she asked the question like this, if she said, what's our current way of working and how does it work for us? So what I observe, she's going to do some observations and then inquire about them. What I observe is that people tend to work independently. Is that right? Is that how we work? Once she's got an answer to that, and somebody says, actually, there's a lot of collaboration, it's just not very visible for this reason, that would be surprising. That would be interesting. That would be different from what she's assuming in this question. Or the person might confirm that, yeah, everybody works really independently. That is the typical strategy around here. Then she could ask, I think it might be helpful if we were collaborating more, if people were pushing back more on what was coming in. Oh, Adina's here. Excellent. Ask me some questions, Adina. You had great ones too here on the forum. If you were to ask, how could we move toward that, and would it be a helpful idea? You might hear all kinds of surprising answers like, well, I'd love to do that, but I've been told by my manager not to. Well, then I'm talking to the wrong person, right? If more collaboration, more interaction is being vetoed by someone else, no point asking the person I got in front of me. I got to go find the person vetoing, right? Or it might be, that's culturally difficult here. In this country, we don't tend to work that way. So it's a cultural problem, and people in this country are not likely to work this way. Now, you could do all kinds of stuff with that. But if you understand that it's a problem of the country that you're in, of the culture and the environment, you could deal with it very differently than saying, hey, let's get everyone together to be more collaborative, right? That may not work. You may need to make other interventions, get people from another country, and change your hiring practices. There's lots you could do. Just for a final, really wacky one, the answer might be, I don't think that's a good idea. I think the type of work we're doing really lends itself to individual work that's completely separated because of things you've done, Julia. You've set up our work this way. So really, we don't know what other people are doing. And Julia, it's your desire that I'm following because you give us such separated, siloed pieces of work. Now then it's Julia's fault. And Julia maybe should ask herself some questions, right? All of those things are things you would not get from the question the way Julia asked it. Now, again, I'm not beating her up. I'm really glad she asked the question, gave us a great example. But the problem with hers is that it has assumptions baked into it that maybe she's not even aware of. And those assumptions limit the answers that you can get. So the thing I want to strongly encourage you to is when you ask technical questions, whether or not you have the deep technical understanding to pose them in the perfect way, don't worry about that so much as making sure that you're offering different options. Could it be this way? Could it be that way? I'd really like to understand this, and I'm happy to hear whatever you have to tell me. Just enlighten me. Could it be this way? Is this the situation? What are you seeing? So those are the sorts of genuine questions. It's really your attitude that's the difference, that are very different from the kind of leading questions that box the other person in, that will only let them give you one type of answer. And guess what? When it's a very technological area, when it's a detailed, complex idea that you're trying to deal with, and you don't understand it very well, you're likely to draw the wrong box. It's not going to be helpful. We get a lot of complaints. This is a very common thing I hear from engineers all the time. The salespeople went off and sold this the way that makes sense to them. They used the language of the customer and they described all kinds of crazy stuff that would be really nice, and the software just doesn't do that, and they've sold something we don't have. That's because the salespeople never asked in customer terms, what does this software do? How can I sell it most effectively? They're assuming that the customer understands it well. They don't. They're assuming they understand it well. They don't. And because they haven't filled in their understanding by being surprised, they come back with the question, can you build one of these out of one of those? And you say, my God, this thing does not do what you've just asked for. So that's how to avoid one of the most common mistakes in asking questions. Again, encouraging you guys to ask questions, but I'm going to carry on because there's lots more exciting things you can do. Now, here's one that's tough for you, and it'll be easy for some folks in the audience who are technological themselves, but for other folks, this is going to take you way, way back. So at some point in your, I hope, in your school days, you did some mathematics that wasn't arithmetic. And I really hope you did something with a guy named Euclid. That used to be the very old way of doing it, or some of his more modern followers in geometry. And one of the things you had to do when you did this type of work is you were writing down things which are called proofs. And in these mathematical proofs, you take very small steps. So you say, this is a line. This line is parallel to this other line. Two parallel lines never meet. Two parallel lines that never meet, which are crossed by another line, have equal angles on the opposite sides. And you're citing it at each point what you're doing. And it feels horribly slow. And when you do it, a lot of people find this very frustrating and difficult because their brains don't work this way. And that's okay. You don't have to make your brain work this way. What I'm just asking you to do is kind of put yourself mentally in that state. What happens when you have a series of steps you're trying to follow, and you're breaking it down into very small pieces and justifying each one? That's the way engineers think, because that's the way computers think. Computers work this way. One thing I often say is that all of us who work with computers are somewhere on the autism spectrum. That's quite a radical statement. I don't know if that's medically true, but all of us have this kind of rigid thinking to a certain degree, because if you don't have it, you can't make a computer do what you want. Computers are the most autistic in the world. They don't understand anything outside their very limited range. They have very specific ways of interacting with the rest of the world. And if you don't follow every one of their rules perfectly, they will say syntax error and stop, which we would never tolerate in a human being. But guess what? That's how computers work, and they do an awful lot of good things for us. Now, why am I telling you to kind of go back in time in this way in your brain? I'm telling you that because it will really, really help you if you break down your questions into lots of small pieces and you make them very discrete and separated, very clear, in the way that that geometry proof might have been if you've ever done that. One thing you could do is if you haven't seen this or you don't remember, grab yourself any book on very elementary geometry, probably aimed at people who are like 12 years old. That's okay. You just want to kind of get yourself in this mindset. Read a few pages of it, try a few of the proofs, kind of think about how you would break down something you'd want to ask that's got a lot of components and a lot of complexity and a lot of human elements, and think about what's the first step, what's the second step, what's the third step. I'll give you some more examples. And I think we might have another example here from the list. I'd love your examples, by the way, because I'd love to talk to you about them. Let's see if I have a good example here that has an awful lot baked into it. Well, Manesh's question might be a good one. So Manesh says, again, I'll remind you, what's the point of 2 code reviews before a merge can be approved other than checking on quality? So I hope you can catch there that, again, Manesh is great. I'm glad he asked this good question, but he does have, this isn't quite a genuine question. Manesh has a point of view, right? So he's promoting a point of view. But the other thing is there's an awful lot baked into this. There's the fact that there are 2 code reviews, that merges can't be approved before that. You don't have to worry about what these words mean if you don't know, but there are these different steps, and you put them all in one question. The point of doing these things is code quality plus something else. What's the something else? So there's a lot of pieces here, and I think Manesh would do better to ask them separately. And I started to illustrate this with Julia's question, but I'll do it more with Manesh's here. I might ask first, how do we do code reviews? Could you remind me? I think I see something that involves 2 code reviews, but I might be wrong. Could you tell me more? Notice how I'm making it genuine there, making sure that the person who's answering my question can answer in many ways. We don't do code reviews. We always do 3 code reviews. Only people whose names start with Q do code reviews. There are many types of answers I could get, many of which would be surprising. That would be good. If I do get the answer, we do 2 code reviews. I say, is that a gate for a merge? Does that stop us doing this next technical step of merging? And what is merging anyway? How does merging work? How does it relate to code reviews? Again, open, genuine question that allows me to find out more about how that process works. And then I might say, is that for code quality? Does it help us improve code quality? Well, yes, that's what code reviews do. Okay, and if I'm improving code quality, then is there anything else it does? Does it help us with something else? Only then, and this is where I think Manesh might have a different point of view, maybe we could just do one of these and be more efficient. Then Manesh might ask, using the information he's got so far, if he's verified all these bits, might say, well, is this an efficiency gain that we could make here? Could, in these cases where you've said it doesn't help us so much, could we have only 1 code review? Would that be better or worse? Again, a genuine question. So you see what I've done there is I've broken down Manesh's question, which has a whole bunch together, into individual pieces. Now that was easier with Manesh's question because it was quite technical. I don't know that I have an example. Oh, maybe I can, should I pick another Julia one? No, I think I can do one from a CEO I talked to yesterday. So she's non-technical in a highly technical field, does a brilliant job solving a really substantial problem in financial services, doing a tremendous job with her highly technical team and getting a great result from them. And she described a question she'd like me to help answer. And it went something like this. I'm just going to give you the flavor of the question. You know, we have high hosting costs, and what I can't tell is whether that's going to continue to stay high and increase as we get more users, or is it going to be that our users actually don't affect it, and what we're going to have is sort of a high standard cost. And, you know, it's also outsourced, and is the outsourcing company contributing anything there? Because maybe those outsourcing people aren't getting it right. I just need to get my head around this entire hosting cost question, because what I need to understand is everything that's going on with our hosting costs. Squirrel, can you help me answer that question? Now, that's not a question. That's the problem, is although it's a fantastic description of the various sorts of things she'd like to know, it's kind of the polar opposite of that mathematical proof that I was encouraging you to use. So if she fires that at a technical person, they're going to get lost in all the detail. We're trained carefully, us engineers, to think in this linear fashion, one thing after the next, lining them up just like that mathematical geometrical proof. And if you throw a whole bunch of things at us, we're going to only be able to pick out a few. That's at least what happens to me very frequently. And I see many folks who hear a question like that. The intent is very good. It is a genuine question. She would love to hear a different answer. She'd love to be surprised and find out we don't need hosting at all. You know, a surprising answer would be great for her. But unfortunately, it's just not broken up into small pieces, and it's not natural to her. One of the reasons she's a great success and she can fundraise like you wouldn't believe and sell amazingly is that she does have this kind of holistic thinking. She thinks about many pieces at once, and she can bring them all together. That's a great characteristic for her to have. It's one you want to repress just a little bit when you're asking technical questions. So my advice to her and to others is to just break that up into pieces. You say, I noticed that we have hosting from AWS. Is there any other source of hosting? Okay, great. So I've looked at the AWS bill and I don't understand its detail, but I see that it's relatively high. Do you see it as high or do you see it as not so high? Okay, you see that it's high. That's great. Can you tell me a little bit more about what are the major factors that make it high? Okay, which are those are going to change when we add 10 times as many users next month with our big client that I just sold, right? And you see how I'm taking the person through the steps. Now, one thing that I said before is that lawyers tend to do this, right? They'll take you through each step and they're trying to lead you down the path. They're trying to force you down one particular direction. Don't you think that the hosting costs are too high? Weren't you outside the bank with the engine running because you were the getaway driver? So you want to avoid that. It's a natural thing when you break it down into pieces to also try to box the other person in. You want to consciously work against that. Because you're operating in an environment you don't understand as well, and you're operating with the other person, trying to help them understand the context, the goal that you're trying to achieve through small pieces, through a series of shorter questions, and that's tricky to do. So I appreciate this may not be something that's easy, reading a geometry book might be helpful, kind of getting yourself in that mathematical frame of mind, and practice also helps. So, I wrote a whole book called Agile Conversations. Send you a copy of this too if you send me an address to send it to, because I'm not trying to sell books. I'm just telling you about things that I do. That book has a whole bunch of exercises for how to ask genuine questions, how to make sure that you're not leading the witness, and so on, to help you to get this sort of information. So, the book's another place that you could get this sort of material. Now, here's another really helpful thing for making sure your questions are short and small. Again, love to hear some from you guys in the comments if you have them. One thing that really, really helps is to have an example. And it's surprising how few people use examples. They tend, because they are thinking about a pattern or something they want to understand more broadly, they tend to say, well, I want to understand all of your thinking about deadlines. Why does your team not accept deadlines? Why do we miss a lot of deadlines? Why are deadlines hard to manage? Those are questions that tend not to be as genuine. They tend not to be as short, but most particularly, they're unclear. And the other person may really misunderstand what you're trying to ask if you don't use an example. So I'll pick one out here for my friend Rich. Rich says, why should we refactor? Great question, but it's very generic. Rich is saying kind of generally, what is the thinking about refactoring in this team? And whatever refactoring is, and different teams seem to define that term very differently. And Rich is asking this generic question. He may try to get to that generic answer at some point, but starting with an example would be helpful. I noticed that the team in the last sprint spent at least 2 days working on refactoring. Is that right? And the other person says, yeah, actually it was 3. You say, great, I'm glad to understand that. Can you tell me, what were you refactoring? Was it for this new feature that we're building in this sprint? Yes, it was. It was something that helped us prepare for that. Tell me about how it helped us prepare. What was it for? What benefits did you get? What costs were there? What worked and what didn't? Now I'm talking, and I'm asking more genuine questions, just more natural to ask the genuine questions. And I'm talking about a specific example. That's going to be easier for the person to illustrate for you. And the person may be able to say, for example, the change Julia. I hope I'm still here. I'm going to try coming out and going in again. I see myself here. I hope I'm still here. Can someone tell me I still am? I had a minor computer glitch, but I hope that that I'm back in and that everything is working. The machine tells me that I am, but I'm not certain that I am. Oh, I'm back. Hurrah. Julia confirms. Thank you. Whew. Okay, that's a relief. Excellent. So where was I? Sorry. Minor computer glitch here. I was talking about using examples. So when you use the examples, it's much easier to be genuine. It's much easier to be specific and to describe what your goals are and to get the answers more clearly. So you won't lose your audience as much, especially on a highly technical topic, because the examples will also make more sense to you. So I hope that's useful. Now, one more technique that goes along very well with this is a very simple one that loads of people know, certainly not something I invented, called active listening. And it can be extremely helpful, especially when you're working along in an area you don't know as well, to give a lot of checking points along the way. So when somebody explains, yes, we use this tool called Kubernetes, and it's out of support and we need to improve it, you say, okay, so this tool called Kubernetes is used for something. I'll ask you what that is in a second. But what you're saying is that you can't use it anymore because it's not being supported. The person says, no, you didn't understand. It's not supported, so when it breaks, we can't get it fixed. And what we need is to make sure that it's up to date. You say, ah, great, so you can use it. You're not unable to use it, but you need the latest version in order to get support. Yes, that is what I need. So as you repeat back to the other person what you've understood, as much as you have, and it may be in your non-technical language, that's good. You notice I didn't talk about Kubernetes versions and open source and support contracts and things like that. I just said there's this thing and you need it to be up to date. That's helpful. So the more you can repeat back to the other person your understanding, the better. And then you can build it up. This is where the short questions help. Because if you build up your understanding over time, then the next time when they say, okay, great, so what do you need? Well, I need to download the new version, update it, check all the installations and run all the smoke tests. You can say, great, let me say that back to you. You need to run certain tests. You need to install the new version and so on. You can say back what you've understood and the person can correct you. And you can build on what you had before, which was, you know, that they're trying to upgrade something to a new version. So the practice of active listening is tremendously useful for making sure that you have actually understood and reflected what the other person is telling you. Okay, so there's a bunch of techniques for asking better questions. So what did I suggest? I suggested, first of all, ask them. Don't hesitate. It's much better to ask and get experience and try it and not succeed than to give up. I said, make sure that your questions are genuine, that you might be surprised by the answer. Make sure that they're short, that you're working kind of mathematical terms, that you're kind of doing a proof, you're lining up all the pieces. And repeat back to the other person what they've said so that you're checking your understanding as best you can. And also use lots of examples to make sure that you're talking about something concrete rather than something abstract. So I hope those are some helpful rules for asking technical questions. And I'd love for lots of you to write to me and to tell me about your experiences if you're watching this on the recording, for example, and also to get yourself a certificate. You know, I printed them up before the pandemic and I was going to hand them out to everyone. Then we all went home and now we're all on screens all the time. So I don't get to hand them out as much as I'd like to, and I'd love to send you one. So please do get in touch. Now, I would love more questions here. I haven't had a lot of questions, a topic on questions, and I didn't get a lot from you. That's okay. I'm not upset about it, but I will leave a few minutes here for you all who are there to ask me questions. If you'd like to be part of the squadron, then the place you can do that is squirrelsquadron.com, which is here on the screen. And you can come to more events like this. You can ask loads of good questions on the forum. We have tons of those going on all the time, or just read other people's. Get my weekly emails, which detail some of the ideas and challenges and provocative things that are coming up with my clients, as you've heard about from me here. And you can certainly stay in touch with me in lots of different ways, including get a certificate from me. You'll find my details there on squirrelsquadron.com. Now, I'll finish with a story just in case some of you would like to ask a question. I'd love for you to do that. And if nobody wants to, that's fine too. We'll just finish a little bit early. But I did want you to hear this story. Now, it's not about specifically, sorry, I've dropped something. It's not specifically about a question that someone asked, but it gives an illustration of the sort of confusion you can get from highly technical people on a highly technical topic that they don't understand. So, and it's also an entertaining story that happened to come up for me this week. And I had a good reminder of it. I had a fantastic person who worked for me many years ago. If Rich is here, he knows this person. And this person was hugely technical, could make a computer do anything that you wanted him to do, wasn't very practical. You've probably all met people who are like this. And we had this very practical topic to tell him about. It wasn't a question so much as information we wanted to pass to him and everybody else. And it was about shares. It was about the options that we had in the company, which hadn't been sold or gone public. So there's shares that many of us had these options. And we mentioned to everyone that the strike price was very low. So the worth of the options, the way they were valued, was a very low number. And if you know something about options, you know that's a good thing. This guy did not know that. And in fact, he became very upset and highly emotional and really angry with me because I had told him, of course, these shares would be worth something. And he said, look, you've just told me how worthless they are. They're worth fractions of a penny. This is really terrible. He had misunderstood because we'd gone fast. We'd gone through the whole piece of information, assuming that he had this context. In the same way, you might assume that a technical person knows about what customers are demanding, knows about the customer service implications of something they're doing, knows about why the changes that they're proposing are challenging for people who use your software. Don't make those assumptions. That's what I learned from this experience, because I had to explain to him, once I managed to help him with the emotional reaction, I managed to get him to listen to me. And once he was calmer, he could actually hear me explain to him that strike prices should be low. Then when you sell your shares, it doesn't cost you very much to exercise your options and you get a lot back. That was a pretty clear financial, technological piece of information, which he didn't happen to know, in which it was hard for him to absorb. And he didn't ask very good questions about it. He had a very emotional response. So I thought you might enjoy that story. The good news is that we did manage to help him understand why that would be good. And he stuck around for many years and did very well when the company eventually sold. So that's the sort of misunderstanding that you can get if you're not clear about your assumptions, if you're not sharing the context, if you ask these sort of long discursive questions, if you bring up things in a complicated way rather than keeping them short and simple, like in a mathematical proof, and most importantly, asking genuine questions. So you're open to something surprising. I think that's some of the most helpful things that you can do. Well, I hope this has been helpful to all of you. I can see there's many of you who are there, and maybe you were doing other things and didn't want to ask me questions here. That's fine. But come along to squirrelsquadron.com. There'll be a follow-up there. I promised you I'd write about 8 behaviors for smarter teams, so I'll be sure to do that. And I'd love to see you at future events that we're running, especially on culture change next week. And then what's in 2 weeks? I think it's software architecture for dummies. So again, if you're interested in understanding what's happening in your technology team, you don't always have to ask questions. You can also look at their diagrams and actually understand them. So I have some clever tricks that you can use to really understand quickly what's going on inside your software. So come along for those. You can find them all on squirrelsquadron.com. And I'll see you there at future events or on the forum or any place else you'd like to find me. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks so much.